class is the first of a series entitled An Overview and Exploration of Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. The course will entail studies in the Gleanings and overviews of various topics and subjects covered in that book. We will begin with the prayer. It seems suitable when approaching this volume of sacred writings of Baha'u'llah to read something before we start adding any of our own ideas or thoughts on the subject from the book itself. And perhaps the best place to begin is right at the beginning. There is a prayer which is given, Shoghi Effendi has chosen as the first excerpt of the book. And I thought if we listen to that, it may put us in the mood for the considerations of the whole volume.
Lauded and glorified art thou, O Lord my God. How can I make mention of thee, assured as I am that no tongue, however deep its wisdom, can befittingly magnify thy name, nor can the bird of the human heart, however great its longing, ever hope to ascend into the heaven of thy majesty and knowledge. If I describe thee, O my God, as him who is the all-perceiving, I find myself compelled to admit that they who are the highest embodiments of perception have been created by virtue of thy behest. And if I extol thee as him who is the all-wise, I likewise am forced to recognize that the wellsprings of wisdom have themselves been generated through the operation of thy will. And if I proclaim thee as the incomparable one, I soon discover that they who are the inmost essence of oneness have been sent down by thee and are but the evidences of thine handiwork. And if I acclaim thee as the knower of all things, I must confess that they who are the quintessence of knowledge are but the creation and instruments of thy purpose. Exalted, immeasurably exalted art thou above the strivings of mortal man to unravel thy mystery, to describe thy glory, or even to hint at the nature of thine essence. For whatever such strivings may accomplish, they never can hope to transcend the limitations imposed upon thy creatures, inasmuch as these efforts are actuated by thy decree and are begotten of thine invention. The loftiest sentiments which the holiest of saints can express in praise of thee, and the deepest wisdom which the most learned of men can utter in their attempts to comprehend thy nature, all revolve around that center which is wholly subjected to thy sovereignty, which adoreth thy beauty, and is propelled through the movement of thy pen. Nay, forbid it, O my God, that I should have uttered such words as must of necessity imply the existence of any direct relationship between the pen of thy revelation and the essence of all created things. Far, far are they who are related to thee, above the conception of such relationship. All comparisons and likenesses fail to do justice to the tree of thy revelation, and every way is barred to the comprehension of the manifestation of thyself and the dayspring of thy beauty. Far, far from thy glory be what mortal man can affirm of thee, or attribute unto thee, or the praise with which he can glorify thee. Whatever duty thou hast prescribed unto thy servants, of extolling to the utmost thy majesty and glory, is but a token of thy grace unto them, that they may be enabled to ascend unto the station conferred upon their own inmost being, the station of the knowledge of their own selves. No one else besides thee hath at any time been able to fathom thy mysteries, or befittingly to extol thy greatness. Unsearchable and high above the praise of men wilt thou remain forever. There is none other God but thee, the inaccessible, the omnipotent, the omniscient, the Holy of Holies.
So Shoghi Effendi has opened the volume with this majestic passage related to the essence of God and the nature of the universal manifestations of God and the perception that the human soul can have of the light reflected through the manifestations. Now, questions arise, I think, when we consider the Gleanings. Some of the questions that you might formulate are, what prompted the guardian to prepare the volume? Is there any significance to the order of the extracts themselves? What was his hope with regard to the effect that this volume might have on the believers? How does he characterize its contents? These questions have been answered in different ways in some of his correspondence written on his behalf concerning the Gleanings. I want to quote some extracts from these that will help to guide us to the answers to those questions. It's good to bear in mind that with the Guardian, of course, began his translation work in Abdul Baha's ministry, serving as the secretary of the Master during 1918, 1919 particularly, and he translated a number of tablets, both from the Persian and the Arabic, into English. And those were translations, as were those of a number of other assistants and translators that Abdul Baha used for the work. And those were sent usually with the original copy of the tablet to the recipient, attached as a translation for the convenience of the Western believers. Then Shoghi Effendi went on to Oxford. He continued his translation work. He was, of course, his purpose in learning English was to assist the Master with the translations of the faith, with the service of the faith. And he was constantly thinking about literature and translations. I remember, I think it's in The Priceless Pearl, or maybe it's a story that Amatul Baha told us, that Shoghi Effendi had asked the authorities there at the university what they considered the greatest piece of English literature. And he had heard from them that it was King James Bible, and he set out to read King James Bible, to study it. And there are those that remember him walking through the colonnades of the college where he would read this. And then he went on and asked for other books, other major books, and began to absorb the finest of English prose and literature in preparation for his task. At the same time, he made some starts at translating Tablets of Baha'u'llah. As far as we know, there is nothing before that time where he had attempted to translate the writings of Baha'u'llah. But there he began some of the extracts of the tablets to the kings. There's a start to the fire tablet, just a few stanzas. Again, a few paragraphs of 7 valleys in his student notebooks, all of which contain lists of, one that contains a list of the names of God in Arabic, and then possible translations of these names. And after the various samples, it will say Swinburne or Keats or Macaulay or wherever he's found this name of God in one of the writings. He associated them with the original Arabic names to give himself a range of choice for the translation of the divine names. Fascinating study, I suppose, will be made of this in the future. And then when he took up the guardianship in 1923, he presented us with the hidden words. And he continued to make some changes and modifications, improvements in the hidden words, even during that first 10 years. He translated a small booklet of prayers and extracts, a few paragraphs from the Kitab-i-Aqdas. The Baha'is had a lot of material from the ministry of Abdu'l-Baha translated by others. Ali Quli Khan had translated the 7 valleys and the 4 valleys, and also had translated the Kitab-i-Iqan. Some Answered Questions was published in English. There was a range of literature and also other tablets that had been gathered into a volume which you will know by the name of Baha'i Scriptures. This was collected by the friends in America, particularly by Horace Holly, and published at that time. The Guardian did not have a hand in the review of the material that was in it. It was all published material that had been, or tablets that were circulating that were put together so that the friends would have it in one volume. In 1931, Shoghi Effendi produced his translation of the Kitab-i-Iqan, and that was a tremendous gift to the West. And again, by 1935, he sent the first installment of the translation of these excerpts, which have now been gathered in this book called the Gleanings. And subsequently, in 1936, he gathered the material for Prayers and Meditations of Baha'u'llah, another very important volume of translations. And his final work of translation was the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf in 1941. And that covers the whole range of it, outside of some excerpts from tablets which were included in his general messages and his world order letters. This covers the full scope. Now, up to the publication of the Gleanings, beside the Iqan, there was no volume of Baha'u'llah's writings selected and translated by the Guardian. It's made a very powerful impact on the Western believers, on the English-speaking Baha'i world at that time. And Shoghi Effendi, in his first references to it, speaks very modestly about it. And then he begins to characterize it in a fuller, more confident manner in subsequent letters. And I'll read you a few of these extracts so you can get a feel for this. This is to the American National Assembly. It says, Shoghi Effendi has been of late engaged in translating certain passages which he has been able to glean, already we have the beginning of the title, from the writings of Baha'u'llah, and which for the most part have not been translated into any language. He is sending you herewith the first installment of his translations, which he trusts will prove of value and interest to the friends, and will serve to assist them in their teaching activities. We'll hear over and over how he connects the preparation of this volume with a thought about what its influence will be on the teaching work. As these extracts are by no means exhaustive and do not represent the entire range of Baha'u'llah's writings, he feels that a somewhat modest title would be appropriate to them when published. He thinks that Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah would be suitable. He goes on in this very modest way. He says, If you suggest any change, please inform him. He hopes to send you during the next few weeks further installments. He leaves the order in which these extracts should appear to the discretion of your assembly, but wishes you to leave between them a space of 3 or 4 lines so as to make it clear that they are not connected and do not form parts of one tablet, but are simply excerpts gleaned from various books and tablets revealed by Baha'u'llah. They bear naturally no titles and should therefore be distinctly separated one from another. Now, the device that was finally added was to number them, which made it quite clear that they were separate excerpts. The assembly seems to have settled with the gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah. It did query whether they could say gleanings from the Tablets of Baha'u'llah. Shoghi Effendi said, term tablets unsuitable, in a short cabled answer. The enclosed represents the last 2 installments. This is a later letter. As these passages are by no means representative of the entire writings of the founder, this is important to remember in this character, not representative of the entire writings of the founder, the Guardian has thought best to give them the non-ambitious title of Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. He asked Mr. Townsend if he thought he could find a more suitable title or suggest an alteration in the one he was suggesting, and that he should inform him if he did. He passed these excerpts also by George Townsend for any comments he might have on the literary form of them. As soon as he had copies of the Gleanings in hand, he presented them to a number of prominent people, which indicates to us from the outset that he felt that this book was suitable for the public and for non-believers. And to one of them he wrote, I shall be very pleased to present you with a copy of the Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, which has just been published in America, containing the most characteristic and authoritative statements from the pen of the author of the Baha'i Revelation, and which it has been my privilege to render into the English language. There's a series of letters of this tone to different individuals, authorities in Palestine and abroad. Later he had the response of one of the believers who had studied the volume carefully and evidently written with enthusiasm to Shoghi Effendi about her feelings about it. And through his secretary he says, I wish to thank you for your letter of November 11th. It was indeed a source of true satisfaction to him to learn that you have been so deeply stirred by the reading of the Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. Now, maybe if he learns that you've been deeply stirred, he'll also be very satisfied. His hope is that you will make a thorough study of this work, and that as a result you will acquire a fuller understanding of the teachings and receive a fresh stimulus to help in spreading them far and wide throughout your country. A true and adequate knowledge of the cause is indeed indispensable to everyone who wishes to successfully teach the message. The Book of Gleanings gives the friends a splendid opportunity to acquire this necessary knowledge and understanding. It gives them in addition that inspiration and spiritual fervor which the reading of the holy words can alone impart. This is perhaps the meatiest passage about how he hoped we would relate to the Book of the Gleanings as individual believers. Again, sometime later, he says, he has learned with profound satisfaction of the deep impression which the newly published Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah has made on you, and he trusts that as a result, you will be stimulated to persevere in your study of this most valuable book. It is the most comprehensive, challenging, and illuminating presentation of the words of Baha'u'llah, and for this reason should be continually read and referred to by the believers. Should be continually read and referred to by the believers, particularly in connection with their teaching work. It is the conviction that nothing short of such a comprehensive volume containing the most remarkable and significant passages from the Tablets of Baha'u'llah, can be of an effective assistance to the teaching work of the Friends that has led the Guardian to devote so much of his time and effort in preparing this work. His hope is that the Friends will now fully avail themselves of this splendid opportunity and will make every effort to better acquaint themselves with the scriptures of the faith. How many of you have read the whole volume of the Gleanings? I didn't want you to show your hands. Just ask yourselves if you've read the whole volume of the Gleanings yet. This is the pen in the hand of the Guardian at the end of the letter, may your understanding as a result of the perusal of this book deepen and your vision grow clearer and your eagerness to promote it by every means in your power correspondingly increase. Once again, he says, the Guardian has learned with satisfaction of the interest and enthusiasm which the reading of the Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah has awakened among the Friends. He feels especially pleased and encouraged to realize that in translating these mostly unknown tablets, he has been of such a valuable assistance to them, and trusts that through their perusal, they will not only deepen in their understanding of the teachings, but will in addition receive a fresh stimulus to work for the cause. So you say, well, we can't teach here, but we can work for the cause here. We can have a fresh stimulus through our approach and understanding and the vision that we acquire through the Gleanings for our services here. Again, in presenting a copy, he says that these Gleanings consist of a selection of the most characteristic and hitherto untranslated passages from the outstanding works of the author of the Baha'i Revelation. I earnestly hope that the light these passages shed on certain aspects of the faith may serve to deepen your highly valued interests in its activities and teachings. From time to time, Shoghi Effendi would refer the believers to Gleanings for them to extract things. He referred George Townsend to it, and when he wanted some passages, and someone else was writing a book and they wanted to quote some passages, he said that he recommended they choose characteristic passages from the Gleanings to represent Baha'u'llah's words. Someone was preparing a statement, and he said to fully support and illustrate this statement, the Guardian would suggest that you incorporate in your address some outstanding passages from the Gleanings, a copy of which he presented to you some time ago. In these passages on the oneness of mankind and the main principles on which it is based, the reader will immediately realize that it is Baha'u'llah who is the originator of that divine world order which we, his followers, are trying to establish in the world. And then he gives some page references suggesting exactly where the person can turn. To the teaching committee in the United States, he said, the Guardian feels particularly appreciative of the emphasis your committee has laid on the study of the Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah, which book he believes should be the continued guide and companion of every believer. You may want to take note of that for yourself here or wherever it is you take notes. He believes that it should be the continued guide and companion of every believer. Sometimes people say, well, what book should I take if I go pioneering? Well, you don't want to leave the Gleanings behind. And then he says this is especially true for those who are actively engaged in teaching the cause. And he adds, it is his fervent hope that this book will kindle in the heart of all the Friends a new light, whereby they will receive a fuller guidance and a greater measure of inspiration in their labors for the cause. look what promises are latent in these words of Shoghi Effendi, how, with our attitude towards this book, we can draw to ourselves new light, fuller guidance, and a greater measure of inspiration. Again, in another letter, he says he's particularly pleased to realize that the Book of Gleanings is of such a tremendous inspiration to the Baha'i youth, and that they all are making a careful study of its contents with the view of preparing themselves for proper teaching work. His hope is that this volume will enable them to gain a fuller consciousness of their functions and responsibilities, and to arise and set the example before the rest of the believers, not only in the field of teaching, but in all the other fields of Baha'i activity as well. Another time he says he hopes that reading of the Gleanings will further inspire you in your work and will give you a still wider vision of its many possibilities. Similarly, echoing the same themes, but with slight variations, and I find it difficult to not read all of them because each one adds a different facet to the gem of what he's given us. He says he also hopes that your study of the Gleanings will not only serve to deepen your knowledge and understanding of the cause, but that through its perusal you will receive a renewed stimulus to carry on with added power, efficiency, and zeal your labors for the spread of the teachings. Concerning Baha'i scriptures, it is preferable not to circulate this book among the non-believers in view of its poor literary standard, and mainly because it contains many errors of translation. The Gleanings is a more suitable work to offer to the beginners and to non-Baha'is in general. This letter was written to our dear Isabel Sabri when she was Isabel Locke, and was very active with the youth. The Guardian feels that a sound knowledge of history, including religious history, and also of social and economic subjects, is of great help in teaching the cause to intelligent people. I'll read that again because so many times you hear this question, well, what should I study? What should I learn about? The Guardian feels that a sound knowledge of history, including religious history, and also of social and economic subjects, is of great help in teaching the cause to intelligent people. As to what subjects within the faith you should concentrate on, he feels that the young Baha'is should gain a mastery of such books as the Gleanings, the Dawnbreakers, God Passes By, the Iqan, Some Answered Questions, and the more important Tablets. All aspects of the faith should be deeply studied. And in England, they need to know more about the administration. That was back then. Seem to be well informed now. So here's a list of books: Gleanings, Dawnbreakers, God Passes By, the Iqan, and Some Answered Questions. 5 volumes, plus other important tablets, to gain a mastery of these books. Now, other places he talks about assimilating the writings, digesting the writings. And finally, this term, mastering the writings, mastering the content of the various books. It seems to me that this is done in such a way that one can repeat the content faithfully. Maybe not necessarily in the same words as the text, but close paraphrases, and certainly not adding anything that is not there or that's different from what is there. Now, he also went on in certain letters to say that beside mastering these books, they should commit certain characteristic passages to memory. It's very helpful too, so that when we're speaking about the faith, answering questions, we can include short quotations or long quotations, whatever the case may be, depending on your capacity to remember the writings and teachings. And that this is so important because it's these words that can penetrate deeply into the hearts of the listeners. There were a number of letters about translation, and stressed the importance of translating the Gleanings into other languages. In one of these he says that he hopes it will soon be in the hands of all the believers, as it is an extremely important volume for acquiring a deeper understanding of the faith. So this theme is echoed back and forth. A few points about content again. He said the extracts are by no means exhaustive. They do not represent the entire range of the Baha'i writings or Baha'u'llah's writings. But he does say they are the most characteristic and authoritative statements from the pen of the author of the Baha'i Revelation. The most comprehensive, challenging, and illuminating presentation of the words of Baha'u'llah. He says again, nothing short of such a comprehensive volume containing the most remarkable and significant passages from the Tablets of Baha'u'llah can be of an effective assistance to the teaching activities of the friends. These mostly unknown tablets. Now, we know the sources and the names of a number of the tablets, but there are many extracts in the Gleanings which the Persian friends were not familiar with. And indeed, Ishaq Khavari, a scholar in Persia, said about trying to identify the source of these from published and unpublished collections of texts which he had in hand, and was never able to complete the work during his lifetime. And it was the object of arduous studies of the research department to finish the identification of the original tablets so that a matching volume of the Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah could be published in the original Persian and Arabic texts. And since that's been published, some years back now, it's provided a common means for teaching in the West. With the exodus of many Persian believers, with the establishment of many Persian pioneers around the world, they had books of writings which the English-speaking or other language groups didn't have. And the believers in the West had Gleanings and the Persian meditations, which the Eastern believers didn't have. So their knowledge and view of things didn't always coincide. Now this has been changed. Now we've got both. It also enables the Western believers who are beginning to dabble in Persian and Arabic, or the children of Persian pioneers who haven't really learned the language, are beginning to look at the holy text. It gives them a model. They can look at the Guardian's English and then they can examine the Persian and Arabic. In fact, these two throw light on each other because of the station of Shoghi Effendi as an interpreter. Many times, his elucidation in English of the passages, for example, from the Iqan in Persian, will make it clearer to the believers what the significance is. They see the significance of the Persian that they might not be grasping on the first reading of it. Of course, there's many levels of meaning in all of this, but it's a felicitous position if you can read both and compare. Naturally, one of the languages is going to be stronger, but this interplay will assist you, I think, in understanding the various extracts. I wanted to show you the volume in Persian. We'll bring a copy. Maybe some of the other friends. You have one but look, there's a copy of the Persian and Arabic Gleanings. And it's numbered identically with the English copy, except that somehow two extracts in English have become one extract when it was first edited, and that hasn't been changed yet. So that's something to bear in mind. I can tell you, I think, maybe I've got I don't have the number, but we'll come to that later on. Perhaps you've read the introduction that Kenneth Christian wrote, and it was he who was the secretary of the teaching committee that received this suggestion or urging of Shoghi Effendi that the Gleanings should be the continued guide and constant companion of the believers in their Baha'i work. And he wrote an introduction. The invitation, I don't know if it was the Guardian or the National Assembly, but it was eventually incorporated in the book. And that's the one that's here. And that gives you some helpful thoughts. It introduces Baha'u'llah to the Western reader who may not be familiar with the author of the volume. And he also suggests in one section that the extracts and as far as to the best of my knowledge, the order has not been changed. And though the order is no special order, it is the order the Guardian gave to the passages. And they do roughly fall into sections. And Kenneth Christian identified 5 of these. He talks about the first 46 pages, basically proclaiming the day of God. And then there's a rather longer section, page 46 to page 136. We're talking about the American edition of the Gleanings, concerning the manifestations of God, the station of the manifestation. And it has other things included in those sections, but that's the general theme. And then from pages 136 to 200, you have a series of tablets dealing with the reality of the human soul and its immortality, and questions related to creation, such. The 4th part concerns spiritual, and I should say myself, I would add, social aspects of the world order and the most great peace, in a number of extracts from tablets. That's 200 to 259. And finally, pages 259 to 346, which is the end of the book, there are a series of passages dealing with the duties of the individual and the spiritual meaning of life. Again, this is just a suggestive picture, but it is sufficient that we may concentrate our attention on one of these groupings after the other in looking through the book. Now, when he says that he's cited here from the most characteristic, from the comprehensive, from challenging passages of the writings of Baha'u'llah, is helpful in analyzing the contents of the book to be able to identify, to the degree possible, the sources, the original tablets from which these various extracts have been gleaned. And first and foremost, we have the Kitab-i-Aqdas. And if you want to take note of the sections, there are 10 sections covering 12 passages from the Kitab-i-Aqdas. And the sections of the Gleanings are as follows. Sections 37, 56, 70, 71, 72, 98, 105, 155, 159, and 165. If you look in the key to the passages of the Aqdas in the back of the volume on the Kitab-i-Aqdas, those passages translated by Shoghi Effendi, you will find that that key refers to the Gleanings number selection and gives you a cross-reference as to which paragraphs of the Kitab-i-Aqdas correspond to those sections of the Gleanings. Once again, the most outstanding doctrinal work of Baha'u'llah, preeminent doctrinal work of Baha'u'llah, is the Kitab-i-Iqan. And it is the foremost book of Baha'u'llah's revelation, we understand, after, or with the sole exception of the Kitab-i-Aqdas. And Shoghi Effendi has quoted copiously from the Iqan in the Gleanings in six sections of the Gleanings. He has gathered 24 passages from the Book of Certitude The appearance of both the Aqdas quotations throughout the volume and of the Iqan quotations throughout the volume are not sequential according to the Aqdas or the Iqan. They're mixed. And it has something to do with the tentative way that the Guardian organized the material. He gave, again, the right to the Assembly to reorganize it if they wanted to. They didn't. But there is a kind of, as we have noted here, a suggestive order to the way things have been put together. And obviously, by not placing all the Gleanings extracts from the Aqdas in one place and all the Iqan extracts in one place, he has wanted to somehow weave the themes of the Aqdas, of the Gleanings, in a certain manner. And it's interesting to bear that in mind as we look at the various quotations. Again, you will find that some of the extracts in the Iqan, from the Iqan, and there's a key to that here if you're interested afterward. One section 13, for example, has a paragraph which begins on page 4 of the Iqan, and then it has another longer paragraph from pages 13 to 15. And then 11 to 12, it skips back again. And then 17 to 19. This is all within one section, section 13. And then 20 to 22. And then 135 to 138. Then back again to 108 and 109, 110, 111, reciting pages from the Iqan. And finally 73 to 75. So it's very interesting to think of the way Shoghi Effendi moved these quotations around for the purposes of this book. And I think that the tendency in that direction is expository. He wants to create a certain line of reasoning. You can't move the passages around in the Iqan, but you can move them around in the Gleanings. And in that, he presents certain material first and then chooses the order of these various passages which he's combined in a single extract. And likewise with the other extracts. Some of them are, this is the one that's most combined and moves around the most back and forth in the Iqan. But that has a certain fresh vision and sweep to it that we should bear in mind when we're looking at them. It's interesting to examine them in the light of the Iqan and then look back to the Gleanings and see these two together. I think it's valuable to mark in one's Gleanings what is Aqdas and what is the Iqan. And the way I've done it, and some people don't like to mark books, but I don't have any problem with that because I'm trying to learn them, and I find I make them my own by marking them. I'm not trying to change the wording or anything, but I just said, I'll have, for instance, I'll start a line of blue pencil down the margin for all the Aqdas quotation, and then some other color for the Iqan items, just so that I realize as I'm looking through the book that, well, this section is all Iqan, or you could find any kind of device that you wanted to do that. But by isolating those passages in that way, one begins to then look at the remainder of the material, because this is a fairly substantial section of the book itself. Now, the Gleanings sections here, I can give you what the Iqan are. We've got the Aqdas, now we'll have the Gleanings, the sections of the Iqan. 13, 19, these are not page numbers, these are section numbers. 13, 19, 22, 90, 91, and 125. The next most important work cited, perhaps in the range of Baha'u'llah's writings, is the preeminent. I see some people whispering across to each other. You can tell us and to make a guess. What would you think it might be? Oh, good. This is making it so interesting for me to tell you now. The hidden words. Shoghi Effendi does not call the hidden words a mystical work. He calls it an ethical work. It tells us how to live, how to act. And he said we should conform our conduct to the content of the hidden words. The Gleanings cites two hidden words, section 42 and 104. Perhaps now it's not so clear the hierarchical order of the writings after that, but I think we could rank the Surah-e-Muluk, the Tablet to the Kings, as of great importance. And indeed, there are 6 sections of the Tablet to the Kings cited in the Gleanings as well. They are 65, 66, 113, 114, 116, and 118. Following that, one of the most outstanding tablets of Baha'u'llah, the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, is cited in section 132. There are 2 passages from the tablet to Napoleon III, 107 and 158, and 2 from the tablet to Queen Victoria, 119 and 120. Of the major tablets of Baha'u'llah after the revelation of the Aqdas, the Lawh-e-Maqsood is featured here with 4 passages, 110, 112, 117, and 122. We'll identify some of the other material as we move through different sections of the volume in subsequent classes. Now, what are the themes? What are the topics that are covered in the volume? Fortunately, Shoghi Effendi had a letter written to the National Assembly in which he said he's made a tentative listing of the topics of the Gleanings and of the subject matter of the various extracts there. That it's not the final word, but it is a word that we have from him about these contents. And he suggests that the list might be useful to them in creating an index of the topics of the book. But this list is so helpful that I've made a copy of it that you could have. It is not, the numbers do not correspond to the entries, neither is it in the same sequential order altogether. It is somewhat, but not altogether, of the extracts as they appear in the final volume. But it is a listing of topics, and it's very suggestive, and it piques our interest immediately. I didn't see that subject, or where is that one? And what I'd like to suggest is that you have this list, and hopefully you're going to study the Gleanings or reread the Gleanings in the course of attending the class. If it's possible, use it for your daily readings or more extensive studies if possible. And that you might note the sections of the Gleanings which correspond to the various topics in the list, which will give you another kind of a table of contents, if you will, based on the words of this original list set by the Guardian, outlining the themes and topics that he's included in the book. The Guardian included this list with the 5th installment of he sent the volume of his translated pieces in installments. There wasn't a day when you could Xerox extra copies. There were, minimum numbers of copies. Every copy had to be handmade or had to have a carbon copy made with a typewriter. You would wait to hear that one installment had been heard or had been received oftentimes, and then he'd send more. Do you all have copies? You run out of copies back there? They're still circulating. Does this side do you all have copies? Yes. Are there enough? Can you read the list? Now I'm going through the list. Some of these you'll say, oh yes, I remember that. And some of them they will probably suggest to you, My goodness. I don't remember that one.
Unity of prophets, power of the Word of God, reference to the next manifestation, nature of divinity, the unity of God, the power and influence of the cause, justice and the Baha'i teaching, the personality and station of Baha'u'llah, the phenomenon of sleep and the worlds of God, prophets as divine physicians, the maturity of the world and the Baha'i faith, refutations of attacks on the cause, the doctrine of atonement, Isaiah's prophecy, obedience to kings and governments, the passing of the old world order and the birth of the new one, fate and predestination, chastity and righteousness, references to Tehran, references to the house of Baha'u'llah at Baghdad, tablet of fasting, importance of the ordinances and laws of God, the love of God and its significance, reference to Ashraf's mother, meaning of divine unity, the station of a true believer, universal script, language, and peace, the transmutation of metals and the divine elixir, moderation in liberty and civilization, life after death, the innate capacity of individuals, degradation of the Shi'as, the nature of man's creation, immortality of the soul, the nature of death, the perseverance of the believers, the identity of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, relations of the Babi and Baha'i faiths, the importance of teaching and its requirements, tablet to the letter of the living, extracts, tablet to Sultan Abdul Aziz and his ministers, extracts, the book of God is the divine balance, the spread of irreligion, divine revelation is progressive, the station of Christ and the significance of his crucifixion, the significance of Baha'u'llah's imprisonment, reference to manifestations before Adam, Baha'u'llah and the ulamas of Iraq, Baha'u'llah addressing the kings of the earth, the doctrine of pantheism, the inequality of men, references to the Jordan and Holy Land, the nature of liberty, miscellaneous exhortations, and prayers.
There must be something there for everybody. Such a range of subjects. It really, I've read the book, but I want to go back and find these things. And I hope that you will, as you're reading in the Gleanings, begin to look around. If you don't want to do it sequentially, jump around. You say, I know where that one is, find it, put it, start filling in the spaces. And then reread the passages as you're doing it to familiarize yourself with their content. I'm sorry, when I was giving you the major points, I didn't include this tablet to Sultan Aziz, and there's a long extract from it, or extracts from it. These extracts from tablets to individual monarchs, as well as several tablets to kings collectively, constitute one theme all by itself in the volume. Now, as far as I know, nobody has the time for us to read every passage of the Gleanings in a study class and come to the other end before you've all moved on to other tasks in the Baha'i world. I wonder if you yourselves have any suggestions how you might like to approach this. My thought was to select a few examples from each type of the tablet as we move along. But at the same time, if in the section that we are discussing or have been discussing, you have questions with regard to something in the tablet that you'd like to air and have discussed, hear the views of others on, we can do that as well. Because oftentimes there's small points or major points that are not clear to one or another, but may be clear to someone else who may be able to resolve a question for us. There's so many terms in Baha'u'llah's writings which are not self-evident as soon as we see them. And the dictionary is of no use whatsoever. You take the term living waters. If you look up living and you look up waters, you still haven't found out what Baha'u'llah is talking about. Water of life, you might find a reference. Something in the dictionary would allude to. Elixir of life, the water of life. So the terms, and I see that some of you have brought tonight copies of this concordance to the Gleanings of the writings of Baha'u'llah. The terms, this and the larger concordance to Baha'u'llah's writings, when you want to know, well, what does Baha'u'llah mean? Why does he keep talking about wine? What does it mean in the Baha'i writings? If you go through a number of passages and look for the word in context and read the various paragraphs, usually it will suggest to you either one interpretation or a set of interpretations and meanings in context. So that you're not just looking at words, you're looking at terms with specific Baha'i definitions. Now, those things are not always clear. Some of them remain mysterious. But as we go on studying and meditating and thinking about it and comparing also the same terms found in present meditations or in the Iqan or in the Kitab-i-Aqdas for that matter, we familiarize ourselves with the scope and dimension and some of the direction that these terms are taking. And it's a very important study. It's not just reading, of course. Obviously, we understand that the way you read other things. There has to be pondering and meditation, weighing and considering. And in that process, we begin to extract some of the deeper energies and influence and inspiration of the passages. Now, you will all be able to, I think, contribute ideas from your own studies of the writings. You'll have thoughts that you could contribute. And I'm sure you all, if you were asked to select a favorite passage of the Gleanings, it would be interesting to see how many of you would come up with the same passage. It would be different passages. I think people's favorite passage of the Gleanings may change from year to year, depending on the circumstances of your individual experience. Some things are inspiring now, and other things are consoling later, and there's all different influences of the passages. The last section of the 5 that were outlined in the introduction to the book, those passages are filled with admonitions about individual conduct, outlook, behavior. It's a source of guidance, supplementary to those same types of passages found in the Kitab-i-Aqdas. Yes. Saved by the bell. I think that's the time to finish. Could look at 2 of these passages that have to do with the character of this revelation and of this time, sections 3 and 4. And then we'll look over roughly the next class over this section on the greatness of the Day of God and consider some of those things. Do you have any questions before we have the final readings? Is there anything anyone would like to ask in relation to what we've been discussing tonight?
The revelation which from time immemorial hath been acclaimed as the purpose and promise of all the prophets of God, and the most cherished desire of his messengers, hath now by virtue of the pervasive will of the Almighty, and at his irresistible bidding, been revealed unto men. The advent of such a revelation hath been heralded in all the sacred scriptures. Behold how, notwithstanding such an announcement, mankind hath strayed from its path and shut out itself from its glory. Say, O ye lovers of the one true God, strive that ye may truly recognize and know him, and observe befittingly his precepts. This is a revelation under which, if a man shed for its sake one drop of blood, myriads of oceans will be his recompense. Take heed, O friends, that ye forfeit not so inestimable a benefit, or disregard its transcendent station. Consider the multitude of lives that have been and are still being sacrificed in a world deluded by a mere phantom which the vain imaginations of its peoples have conceived. Render thanks unto God, inasmuch as ye have attained unto your heart's desire, and been united to him who is the promise of all nations. Guard ye with the aid of the one true God, exalted be his glory, the integrity of the station which ye have attained, and cleave to that which shall promote his cause. He verily enjoineth on you what is right and conducive to the exaltation of man's station. Glorified be the All-Merciful, the revealer of this wondrous tablet. This is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon men, the day in which his most mighty grace hath been infused into all created things. It is incumbent upon all the peoples of the world to reconcile their differences, and with perfect unity and peace abide beneath the shadow of the tree of his care and loving kindness. It behoveth them to cleave to whatsoever will in this day be conducive to the exaltation of their stations and to the promotion of their best interests. Happy are those whom the all-glorious pen was moved to remember, and blessed are those men whose names, by virtue of our inscrutable decree, we have preferred to conceal. Beseech ye the one true God to grant that all men may be graciously assisted to fulfill that which is acceptable in our sight. Soon will the present day order be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. Verily thy Lord speaketh the truth, and is the knower of things unseen.
So if you'd like some homework assignments, let's take up to, say, page 46, the first 50 pages of the book. We'll gather together again after 2 weeks. Take a closer look at some of these extracts, where they've come from, to who they've been addressed.